Hey, welcome back to Tea and Talk with BodyMagick. I don't know what that is.
It's good.
Okay. Today we want to talk about flexibility. What do we want to say? Flexibility in yoga, I guess you could say, or in your practice.
Right, and how it is entirely unnecessary for you to be a flexible person to start doing yoga.
Straight up. Both of us have had the experience of coming into yoga as hyperflexible. And it is actually, how do I say this? It is a journey to become stable, as much as it is a journey to become flexible.
Yeah,
so
being hyperflexible is not an ideal by any means. You are just as much at risk of hurting yourself than you would be if you're not so flexible.
Yeah, and
not more maybe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's no stability, and so the knees will cave in, or it's just all loose and floating around
shaky
in there.
And terrible.
And so, you'll see images of people who are just flattening themselves on the earth, and it may not be serving them over time. And so it's really important not to take images and keep in mind that some of the yoga images that are out there, the people have backgrounds in dance, they have backgrounds in gymnastics, they are coming from different places and bringing that into their yoga practice. So if they can bend backwards halfway, that isn't necessarily because they've done yoga. It can be from other modality
trainings.
Yeah. But that is the number one thing I hear is I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible. Nah,
I can't bend over and touch my toes.
That's fine. You'll get there eventually.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember.
Or you won't.
Or
and that's fine
that's
too.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that, yes, you can come into yoga for the physical health of it and the postures, and you can come into yoga for fitness, you can come into yoga for flexibility, but regardless of what brought you there or why you're there in the long run, it's a journey. The journey is yours. And what you learn about your body and what you learn about the way that it works is just as important as being able to bend over and touch your toes. So that getting stuck halfway down, what are you going to go through and what's going to come out of you and what are you going to learn about yourself on the way down to being able to touch your toes? That's maybe more important than just being able to bend over in the first place.
A hand version of a forward fold, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, absolutely. It is the journey, not the destination. And I think that and this is what maybe differentiates BodyMagick from typical kinds of yoga is that we are really energy focused and energy based. So the posture is only part of what's at work, right? And so how your body is opening or closing is more important than the shape that you're making.
Right. If you're stuck and you can't get into a full pigeon and you feel like you need to scream, I want to be able to hear that scream from you and explore why it's there and what's stuck in your body that's making you feel like you need to scream because you're stuck. And then maybe once you let that out, we can get you a little bit further into that posture. But that's just as important as being able to slam yourself into a full split right away.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Never slam yourself into a full split.
Don't ever do that. I had a mentor who introduced an idea to me that we are emotionally or in our lives as flexible as we are in our bodies. So the idea being that if you're hyper flexible, you might lack boundaries and you might be a little bit too right? That's a different video. Unrelated to the body. Sort of. but that you know, and then the people who are inflexible tend to reflect that in how they are interpersonally or in their lives as well. And that the beauty of the practice in your physical body is that it brings you closer to center. So for me, I lacked boundaries. I was like really, really flexible, and I could, you know, splat myself into different positions, and I was like, look at me go, woo. And then I realized I had no stability, and I had no, I didn't have a strong, firm foundation, a strength to build from and to work from. And so then I went kind of the other way, where I created a formidable body that was like stretching hurts. And then it's been a journey to come back to center. And that's usually what happens. It's like if you have a lot of feminine, you'll hypercompensate with masculine, and then you'll sort of like find a space in between, in the middle. Which again plays into the journey aspect. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to think of it like that the boundaries and things like that can be connected to your flexibility.
Definitely.
And that when you build strength, you're also like more in control of that flexibility, and the different ways you can express that flexibility change, so you can be more adaptable.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think to speak back on how maybe not being able to, or not being so flexible, not being quite as bendy, it sort of echoes a personal rigidity, right? And that can boil down to embarrassment. Like, you look like an absolute weirdo sometimes when you're doing yoga. And somebody who's got a lot of that personal rigidity probably is uncomfortable looking like an absolute weirdo in front of people. So of course they can't bend over, because they're not willing to release themselves in that way, right? And
yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah, and somebody like me who was hyper flexible, I came in, I was like, I'm so good at this because it's something that gave me strength in that moment, but I realized I still couldn't hold myself up, or I'd still fall down all the time because I have no balance.
Right.
But in becoming more physically strong, I'm aware of the fact that I don't necessarily need to bend over in front of obstacles in order to receive gratuity from it. It's important. Strength is good.
Strength is good.
But flexibility is also good. There's a fine line there.
Flexibility is also good. Yeah. And like finding... So I guess what I'm interested to know from you guys out there is, have you limited yourself in your practice? And maybe even just like a point of reflection is, are you choosing, so if you are practicing, are you really flexible and you're choosing classes that just promote that flexibility? Or are you stepping into a more solar, strength-based practice to build that part of yourself? Is that something that, is that an awareness? If not, is that something that you'd be willing to bring into your awareness?
Have you built a safety net around yourself? And are you willing to step outside of that in order to discover more about yourself?
Yeah. So like people who are really strong will be like, oh, I'm going to solar because, you know, they can hold themselves up in it. And it feeds that ego, right? But people who are flexible, it's the same thing. It's like, I go to a class because I feel really good about myself, because I don't know why I keep wanting to use the word splat. I can splat myself.
Full on splat.
Just a splat. But because I can like go so deep and even deeper, and like the more I practice, like I go so far, my legs like, you know, fall open, and my hips fall open, and my knees touch the floor, and my knees touch the floor, but I actually support underneath them, because it creates this like instability in my hip joint to have them open that much.
Right. Yeah.
For prolonged periods of time. And it's actually more interesting to explore it with support, because it changes how my body feels in that posture, and it feels like it's doing more work.
It adds to your awareness of what you're capable of and what things feel like.
Yeah.
Definitely.
For sure.
I think you pulled a card recently that the key to the situation is what is absent, right? So is there more to be learned from yourself and from your situation if you're ignoring what you're lacking, or if you feed into that?
Yeah. So that is, I think, yeah, that's like what we wanted to say about flexibility. That's where we wanted to go with that. And now we want to hear from you. So you can tell us your experiences. And we'll see you soon. Bye.